Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Not Just New Movies podcast, the show where we review a seemingly random film currently not in theaters. My name is Ben Pearson, and today we're going to be talking about John G. Avildsen's 1989 film, The Karate Kid Part 3. Joining me is my regular co-host, Tyler. How are you, man?
I am good. It's lucky I got to join you today because my full-time job right now is revenge.
Oh, revenge.
So, much like Terry Silver.
Yes, the Terry Silver School of Revenge.
I'm only focusing on revenge right now.
You and Mike, what was that? The bad guy's
Kreese?
name in this movie? Mike?
John Kreese.
John Kreese. Mike,
Mike
karate's bad boy.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever his last
Mike
name
is
was.
fine.
Yeah, you and Mike are the tip-top A students at the Terry Silver School of Revenge.
Yeah, I only know how to break ribs.
Oh, man.
What
a movie. Well, if you're a first-time listener, welcome to the show. You can find all of our previous episodes at njnmpodcast.blogspot.com. If you'd like to contact us, you can do that by email at notjustnewmovies@gmail.com. And this is NJNM to the third power, Not Just New Movies Superscript 3, which is a mini-series covering movies that have the number 3 in the title or that are the third entry in a franchise. Mm-hmm. Today, like we mentioned, we're going to be talking about The Karate Kid Part 3. But before we get into our discussion of that movie, let's see if Tyler has any hot tea to pour today.
Guys, it's been pretty cold around here, so it's time to maybe sip a little hot tea. Oh, wait, I forgot. I got to do my, hot tea. And do you listen back to these episodes? There's, little entry musics for these.
I can't say that I do, but I really should.
So today's hot tea is, Ben, we were just talking about Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, and my hot tea today is, if you like that kiss between Kylo Ren and Rey, guess what? They're kissing cousins.
Oh, man.
Now let's go through this, Ben. So Palpatine is Rey's granddad. Mm-hmm. So he had a son or daughter who also produced kin in the form of Rey. And then Palpatine, what would you call it? Immaculately concepted Anakin Skywalker with his midichlorian powers on Shmi Skywalker. And then Anakin had children who then had children, Kylo Ren. So I think they're cousins. Maybe FDR, Eleanor Roosevelt type cousins, but still kissing cousins. And the galaxy is that small.
You know what? I'm just going to, in the interest of brevity,
let me send you the family tree real quick.
I'm just going to agree with all this because I feel like Rise of Skywalker is a cinematic disaster, and
interesting.
I don't think that maybe that's my hot tea. I don't know if that's well, that makes no sense, but I love it. I don't think that's a particularly hot take that movie was a huge disappointment.
Yeah, I don't know what they were doing there.
That's how I felt about it. So,
but let's pay Alan Dean Foster, Ben.
Yeah, there we go.
Hot tea. That hot tea's cold.
That is not pleasant to sip anymore. It's been sitting out for way too long. Okay, let's now that we've beaten this bit to death, let's just go ahead and let's cultivate the cinematic bonsai tree that is The Karate Kid Part 3.
The time has come when a student must question.
I know you don't believe in fighting, but this isn't exactly fighting, you know.
Not exactly ping pong either.
When a teacher must let go.
Miyagi always train you, but for tournament, cannot.
When a conspiracy is planned.
You said that if I beat this LaRusso kid in the All-Valley tournament, that you give me 25% of your new dojo.
When a trap is set.
You know how to front sweep?
Not really. Do you know how to sweep?
Of course. All like this. And left to side.
It's no joke.
I need your title. You don't enter? That affects my financial future, Daniel. Get it? You think you can rely on that crane crap? Last time you weren't fighting this.
Mr. Miyagi loves you. He has faith in you.
This guy wants to break you, humiliate you, stomp you into the ground. Yes!
I'm sorry if you don't like it, but I got problems, and if you're not going to be part of the solution, don't give me a hard time about it.
Now, the man must make a choice, and the kid must become a man.
You are going to defend. You're getting in that ring.
What am I doing?
First he suffers, then he suffers some more.
Ralph Macchio, Pat Morita, a John G. Avildsen film, The Karate Kid, Part 3.
All right, Tyler, before we get into this, I want to call your attention to something. The director of this movie, John G. Avildsen, does that name mean anything to you? Did you happen to look up his filmography at all?
when I saw his name, I was like, I feel like I've seen that name before, but I did not do any research. No, sir.
So he directed Rocky, which is very interesting because the first Karate Kid movie is basically a remake of Rocky.
Yeah.
It's it's a sports movie essentially leading to this final confrontation. The only difference is that Daniel LaRusso actually wins at the end of the Karate Kid, whereas Rocky loses in the first Rocky.
For Rocky.
Sorry, spoilers for all of these movies. This interesting thing is John G. Avildsen directed the first 3 movies in the Karate Kid trilogy, or the Karate Kid franchise, rather. And he only directed 2 Rocky movies. He directed the first one and then Rocky 5, which at the time was meant to be the final one.
Yep.
So I guess that was like him coming back to sort of like put a capstone on, that portion of his career.
That was the same year, wasn't it?
Well, that was what I was going to bring up. Karate Kid Part the Karate Kid Part 3 came out in 1989, and then Rocky 5 came out in 1990. Oh. And Avildsen was nominated for back-to-back Razzie Awards for Worst Director for both of those movies. Oh no! So that's kind of unfortunate.
That's a 1-2 punch of insult.
Of disappointment.
Disappointment.
Yeah. I just find it kind of interesting that Avildsen, he, like, say what you will about the Rocky franchise, but that movie, I think, crystallized the sports movie formula in Hollywood for generations to come. Like there are so many different Rocky spinoffs and and sort of ripoffs. The Karate Kid movies, like I said, are kind of like very much in that same mold. And it's just fascinating that like he made the first Rocky movie and then decided, okay, I'm going to do this again, but with karate and teenagers instead of a grunting Sylvester Stallone. And then made 3 of them. And then the third one, which we're going to talk about today, I kind of felt like was essentially this franchise's version of Rocky 4, where this Mike character that we alluded to earlier is sort of the Ivan Drago of this franchise. There's that moment when I think Terry Silver is training Daniel late in the movie, and he talks about like, he wants you dead. Like he's not going to stop until you're dead. And that's very much like how Ivan Drago kind of was treated in the ring. And then there's a cross montage late in the movie where Mike is like punching through bricks and Daniel and Mr. Miyagi are out like on the beach doing kata together. Yeah. And it's very, the juxtaposition between their 2 training styles was very much just like, Drago, getting injected with whatever HGH and then, and like, running around in like a high-tech Russian facility. And then, contrast with Rocky, like out, on a mountain lifting logs or whatever he was doing in that movie. So I just thought it was kind of interesting coming from the same director who was so responsible for, like establishing this sports movie formula in the American cinematic consciousness for a long time. So,
then let me ask you, how long did it take you to realize that Rocky 1 was not directed by Sylvester Stallone?
Oh, many years.
I'm going to tell you 2 months ago I found that out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
For so long I thought Stallone was, because he's such a director now, that I figured it was his passion project. But then I watched it recently and I was like, oh, wow, he wrote it, but he didn't direct it.
Yeah, there's so much mythology about the making of especially that first Rocky movie and how he was essentially broke. He had like $10 in his pocket or something. And like the offer came for him to sell the script so somebody else could star in it. And he rejected the offer because he knew that this was like his ticket to fame and all of that. So yeah, like all the mythologizing that goes into that, it's very easy for everyone to think that Stallone, especially because he directed so many entries in that franchise, directed the first one. But that was our boy John G. Avildsen. So let's get into what did you think about the Karate Kid Part 3?
Man, I've seen it before, and I watched it again on IMDb TV.
That's how I watched it too.
IMDb TV, and watched those commercials. But it's there's not a lot of karate, I want to say. Like Miami Connection, I think, has more karate.
Yes,
and
it does.
A far cooler club scene.
Miami Connection, by the way, a very low budget movie, which listeners probably haven't heard of, but I would highly recommend seeking out. It's very, very entertaining.
I would highly recommend the Riff Tracks version but it's filmed at my alma mater, UCF.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like a little bit of the dialogue is lacking. LaRussa tends to overtalk, like over-explain things. I guess they call that what's that dialogue where you're explaining
exposition?
But they don't do that. They're just talking. I really like Terry Silver, even though he's a total asshole. John Kreese is in the movie maybe 5 minutes. So a lot of the original Karate Kid mythology is kind of forgotten about, because I think part 2 he goes to Japan, but he only mentions like the girlfriend he met, but nothing from that era is kind of tied into this.
Right.
So it kind of feels like Back to the Future 3, where it's entirely separate from the trilogy almost. Like it's the same characters, but the storyline isn't like concluding a 3-movie arc or anything like that. I don't know. What did you think?
I mean, I just feel like I think the general consensus about this movie is that it's a pale imitation of the previous 2 movies, and it really does feel like I was explaining the plot of this to my wife when I was watching it. She came into the room and was not watching the whole movie with me, but I was trying to like catch her up a little bit on what was going on. It was like surprisingly convoluted. Like, okay, so Terry Silver, he's this plutonium dealer, right? He works for this company called Dynatox Industries, and then John Kreese, who's the villain from the first movie,
right?
Basically gets like embarrassed in the parking lot in the beginning of the second movie, and then his life falls apart, and all of this, like they concoct this elaborate revenge scheme, which I'm still not fully understanding exactly what they were hoping to get out of Daniel losing, other than just like the embarrassment of him losing in front of X number of people who come to a local karate competition in the San Fernando Valley. Like, I don't understand how that. Yeah, exactly. Like, what? That's the life-ending. This huge revenge that you've spent a full year like dreaming about. That's it. That's the best you can come up with.
Nobody's gonna buy his bonsai trees. They'll be so embarrassed.
Yeah. So anyway, it was more complicated than I thought, like the story. And she was just like, man, the lengths they had to go to come up with, to like essentially extend this franchise into a third entry. And I was like, yeah, that's a good way to describe like what was going on here. This movie feels like it doesn't need to exist. Whereas like, Phantasm 3 and some of the other stuff that we've talked about in this miniseries, it all feels kind of, some of it is more ridiculous than others, but I would say a lot of the stuff that we've covered has felt like a natural extension of the franchises that their respective franchises, and this one just kind of feels like tacked on a little bit. Like not enough happens, and there's not enough meat to it to really make it feel like a full meal. That's kind of how I felt about it anyway.
Yeah, it's one of those where maybe it was attempting to bring in people, because it doesn't refer back a lot. All there is like Miyagi and Daniel's relationship, and that's about it, man. Yeah, and he kind of falls from grace, falls away from Miyagi's teachings, and comes back. His super lame techniques of kata versus just beating the crap out of somebody. Yeah. Obviously, karate is for defense only. It's not for attack. We learned that from Power Rangers 4 years later. But you're right. This is not a great movie to do a podcast episode on, because there's not a lot to, dive into or try to. It's not like it's the Christ story or anything like that. It's just a kid being bullied by grown men, 40-year-old men who were in Vietnam, who just, I guess, need to constantly be violent and toxically masculine, which I thought was maybe a theme, but it predates that theme, I think. So I don't think they address it at all. They just kind of have these characters being macho douchebags, but and then it ends, and it's like they never get their come up. Like they never get he doesn't get arrested for pouring toxic sludge into the into nature. when there is kind of a theme of nature in this one, so
right, yeah, the bonsai thing. That would have been a good way to sort of like thematically tie that up or link those two ideas, and it really doesn't. It's just like sort of pays lip service to him in the very beginning. Like, what is the point of him being a plutonium dealer who is dumping toxic sludge? It doesn't factor into the rest of the movie at all, because it's basically just like, hey, I'm a rich guy doing business stuff. And then he's like,
the 80s.
Clear my schedule, secretary. I'm in the business of revenge for the rest of this movie. And then like, what? Yeah, like you're saying, there's no comeuppance there on that front. You would think that the movie would end with like Daniel somehow revealing to the feds that he's, dumping toxic waste in another country, and he like gets indicted or something.
Right. But they even talk about grand juries. They're like, "What are you going to do about the grand jury?" He's like, "I just invite the prosecutor over." It's like, I guess that ties it up. I guess everyone's corruptible.
Yeah, that's it. So it really felt sort of half baked. And I was reading a little bit about it, and it seemed to the behind the scenes story seemed to be that Martin Kove, who's the guy who plays John Kreese, the Cobra Kai dojo master or whatever. He, I guess, Sensei was filming another movie. So like they couldn't wait on him. So they just wrote this character of Terry Silver into the script. And it makes a lot more sense with like, I don't know, maybe it doesn't make more sense. Maybe I'm just trying I'm trying in vain to imagine a better movie than the one that we got.
I think it wouldn't make any sense. I think it did make a little sense that they brought in this guy with like unlimited resources to try to throw at Miyagi Dojo. Like Kreese was broke, a loser. Yeah. What is he gonna do? Just like constantly threaten kids at like high school? Like hey, get over here.
I imagine him like training Daniel in the same way that Terry Silver did, and like driving a wedge between him and Miyagi somehow, and like sort of subtly trying to enact his revenge by like, you know how in Hook, Dustin Hoffman's Captain Hook,
of course
like,
I do,
tries to get the kids like he like ingratiates himself with Pan's children as like the ultimate act of sabotage. Yeah. Like it's this like deep
boy.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe there's something like that that they could have explored.
Well, Ben, I'm glad you said that, because if you wanted to see that theme with John Kreese, Cobra Kai.
Are you watching that show, by the way?
I did. I watched it. I bought the DVD, and I got a free headband, and I can flip the headband whether I want to be on Miyagi-Do or I want to be on Cobra Kai.
Okay, I have not. Got beat up. I have not taken the plunge into Cobra Kai, but I hear it's very good. Do you enjoy, or did you enjoy it when you watched it?
I did. There's a lot of kids. Like, it's a very, sometimes it's like a Nickelodeon sitcom, but then at other times it's got its original Karate Kid heart. Daniel's son returns. Lauren's son returns. Miyagi's dead, but Kreese comes back. Spoilers. There's a lot of cool ideas. The one thing they're missing, though, Elizabeth Shue. She,
you know what? I think she's coming back.
Oh, don't ruin it! Oh my god.
I think she is.
The few things in my life that I look forward to is Elizabeth Shue cameos that I didn't see coming.
Yes, indeed.
Much like the Fivecast. You remember Fivecast lore. Previous timeline. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. It's too difficult to explain. One other, since we're talking about sort of behind the scenes things, the only other thing that I thought was really interesting was that, what is her name? Robin Lively, who plays the Jessica Andrews character.
Yeah.
Wikipedia tells me that the producers of this movie were forced to modify her role because she was originally intended to be the love interest for Daniel, but she was only 17 at the time that they filmed it, and Ralph Macchio was 27 years old,
though
he was only supposed to be 18. Yeah.
No way. Hold on.
Yes. Yes, that is correct. So even in like the original movie, he was way older than he was supposed to be, because the original film came out in like 84 or something, right? I think, and this is 89.
It's so crazy.
Yeah, he was like already in his 20s when the first movie came out. So, and he looked like so young and skinny, especially in that first film.
Yeah,
you can sort of see that his body is changing in interesting ways.
He's finally hitting puberty in his 20s.
Yeah. But yeah, I just thought that like the idea that that the romantic romantic tension or whatever between those characters basically had to be excised from the plot because they were like, oh, this is maybe illegal if we try to do this. So so they basically just like toned that down to where they were friends instead of romantic.
Well, then she doesn't even show up to the tournament. So what kind of? I guess she does leave, but still, why does she leave? Why couldn't she just be there for the tournament? I don't understand.
That was a really weird choice too. I didn't understand why they were just like, okay, well, I have to leave now because I've only been here for 2 months and I'm just like going back to Columbus, Ohio, and I'll help you out with all your bonsai tree and stuff. But like, what was her living situation? Like, what were the circumstances that brought her to Reseda or wherever they are?
I have no idea. It's like she maybe worked at the pottery place, but also lived there. So maybe her family, maybe a family member owned the shop.
Yeah, they may have
explained. I mean, there was plenty of other dialogue that they could have used. That time that we spent listening to them talk off screen could have been used to explain what's going on with her situation. But instead, it was like, "Hey, yeah, man, let's go down. Oh yeah, that's fun. I love hot dogs. Yeah, the carnival's always got great hot dogs. Let's go get some funnel cake."
And like she seems so invested in Daniel and Miyagi and their relationship and all of that stuff. You would think that she would just have like a natural curiosity to see what happens at this fight.
Yeah.
Like she might want to like worry about changing her flight or something.
That would have been a good ending. Like maybe she shows up at the end when they're hugging and she's like, I got a different flight. I just wanted to see you win.
Yeah. And I don't know if
old friend that's 10 years older than me.
I don't know if this movie was intended to be the final one, because I think the next film in this franchise is The Next Karate Kid with Hilary Swank. But I think that was like years later. I think there was a big gap here.
I think.
Okay, yeah, so several years later.
That's the one I haven't seen. I'm excited to dive in.
So yeah, those are all the sort of like behind the scenes elements that I culled from the Wikipedia page that I thought were arguably more interesting than the movie itself, or at least like makes the movie more interesting, like knowing that stuff and sort of like watching what could have been play out simultaneously with what is actually happening. But what did you have sort of earmarked to discuss with this movie? I know you're talking about like it's not great podcast material because it's not like you can draw like a line between like, oh, this is an allegory for what was going on in the world at this time or whatever. It's just sort of like the story is just sort of there. But were there any moments that stood out to you?
I mean, those kids were pretty annoying that kept showing up to get him to sign the thing. Can
we talk about them for a second? So you got Mike, right? Who's the karate's bad boy.
I think sometimes people refer to us as podcasting bad boys. Have you ever responded to those accusations?
I accept them with open arms. If anyone just acknowledges that we're podcasting anything, I will take it. Okay, Mike Barnes. That's the character's name.
Point Barnes. That's right.
Yeah, and the whole thing with Terry Silver hiring him and like being like, live at my my mansion and like I'll give you per diem to like wander around the city and like he's just like his weird like living vicariously through karate's bad boy. It's such a weird thing. But anyway, you've got Mike Barnes, who's sort of like the leader of this gang, and then when Mike first shows up and meets Terry in person for the first time, Terry's like, here's my guys, Snake and Dennis. It's like, wait, what? You
I haven't come up with a nickname yet, so it might change.
If you want to party in LA, Snake's your guy. Like he's the guy who's gonna make some trouble. And it's like, this kid, he looks like friggin' Farva from Super Troopers movies. Like what? I don't know. I was very amused by the contrast in names between Snake and Dennis.
That was funny. And then did you enjoy the Terry Silver's Sauron-like performance where if you know anything about Tolkien's Legendarium, Sauron used to look fair and look nice, and that's why he would trick people. He was able to trick people. So Terry Silver coming in as like a friend and then turning ever so quickly.
I'm a poor guy now, and I'm gonna go in disguise, and then I'm gonna infiltrate this lower class world and try to get Daniel on my side. Yeah, I mean, the Terry Silver character is just full on deranged. Like, there's that moment in the beginning where he's like, I think he's on like a Wall Street kind of phone in a bathtub or something, and he's just like cackling like a maniac. And I'm like, what is this character? What is this performance? And I saw that Roger Ebert did not like this movie. But his colleague Gene Siskel evidently commended the performance of Thomas Ian Griffith, who plays Terry Silver, and thought was nearly that performance alone was nearly enough to save this movie. And I was like, I mean, I guess it's entertaining and just like he seems to be in a totally different movie than everybody else kind of way. But I wouldn't call that like a good performance. I guess I enjoyed it, but like, I don't know if you want to like parse the difference between good and enjoyable, but
any performance is more entertaining than working alongside Roger Ebert.
Boom. Pile driving a man who's been dead for several years.
I'm Terry Silver at the Roger Ebert and Siskel television show. Yeah, the one scene where he's like in a towel and he's like, break his knuckles. Yeah, I love it. I'm going to use that. It's like, yeah, you can use it, man. It's not a stand-up bit.
Yeah, and then there's the moment where he's training Daniel and Daniel's like, why do I have to hit the board? And like Terry Silver like throws a fake fit and he's like, I turn wimps into winners, not the other way around. Christ! And he like walks around the corner, and then the camera is there, and like there's this like blind, like film noir shadows kind of over his face, and like you see he's like I don't know, just on the other side of the wall, like eagerly waiting for Daniel to man up and beat this thing. And he's basically like laughing out loud like a movie villain right around the corner where he's still within earshot of Daniel. It's like, man, this performance is just dialed all the way up.
Daniel's just like, Terry, you okay back there? Oh yeah, I'm still mad at you though. What did Terry and Kreese see in Vietnam to make them such a ragamuffin team of violent men? But they're not so violent that they're like, we could just kill Miyagi. Like there were there's like 5 times where they've snuck into their house and their business, and it's like, we could just kill these guys. And Kreese is like, no, I want to be there for it. And then at the end of the movie when they win, it's like they're just like, dang. He throws a t-shirt back into the crowd, and then it's just the end.
Yeah,
you showed them.
I think it's because these movies are rated PG, and like the idea of them like taking, that's the thing, right? Like the idea of this of these guys as Vietnam War vets who have like PTSD and who have maybe committed atrocities, during the war and like can't shake that is kind of an interesting idea to explore. It's like the same thing that underpins the Rambo movies, right? That franchise, like the exploration, especially in this era, 1989, like the 80s, like Vietnam was not that far removed from people, obviously as it is today. But
Ben, did you know they didn't have a parade for them when they came back?
Yeah, and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, no, like I understand what you're saying. Like I know that's a joke, but like, I can't remember. But like that basic core concept sounds really interesting. But I feel like because this movie is PG or is rated PG, they're hampered into like only being able to raise that topic without actually exploring it to the level that they want to. Like you can feel the filmmakers and the writers being like sort of having to be held back from that, because I absolutely feel like you're right. They would sneak in and they would just like poison Miyagi's tea or something and murder him because he's caused them such, he's aggrieved them in such a way, or that's how they perceive the situation.
And that they use racial slurs towards him constantly.
Yes, constantly. The PG rating is fine for that, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's
they hate all things Asian cultures.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Their dads taught them to hate the Japanese, and then they went to Vietnam, and now they hate the Vietnamese. It's probably a direct line to their problems. I fully feel like that is there, sort of in the margins of these movies, but never fully explored because it's not really allowed to be. Right.
But Yeah, it is kind of interesting too. And I was listening to the Fraudcast, the
nice.
Film Drunk podcast, and
friend of the show.
I think Matt Lieb, one of the co-hosts, was talking about watching all these movies and being surprised that, like, especially in the 80s, this franchise in particular seemed to go against the grain of a lot of what American culture was doing, because, like, you know, even with the Rambo movies and some of the other stuff that was going on, and then Red Dawn and movies like that, where it's like the military industrial complex was depicted in a heroic light in the 1980s. And this movie is one of the few, you know, major mainstream entertainment franchises that was like, yeah, the U.S. military guys are the bad guys in this. And you know, the idea of like toxic waste and like just dumping it in Borneo because nobody gives a shit about Borneo, like that kind of idea was not in. I feel like that's something that resonates more today than it would have with audiences back then, because of the culture that was so prevalent at that time. But still, even with all that stuff said, this movie just really feels like it's just kind of like stringing along. There's not really much there, but
it definitely feels like a paint by numbers kind of thing, where they just had to do something with, like, the rights were going to expire or something.
Yeah,
so we got to get something
really
out.
feels that way. What did you think about the Miyagi bonsai tree? That whole thing about him like planting it in the Devil's Canyon or whatever they called that, and like extricating that from there, and that whole scene where the guys are like suddenly at the top of the cliff pulling the ropes up, and like there's that threat of sexual assault at one time. It's like, oh geez, this movie is it's pretty dark for all of us.
Miyagi's an interesting character, and I wish I would have read back on the first two movies. I've seen them, but I think he might have been interned during World War II, or his family was interned, and I think he had like a wife who had passed away. So I'm probably getting all this wrong, but I felt like the third movie was going to, like, the bonsai tree was connected to that. Like maybe his family brought that tree over, or reminded him of someone in his family, but they don't really say anything about it. It's just like, he's just really attached to that bonsai tree. I can understand it represents, you know, his homeland. But then everything comes out okay anyway. So there, I don't know. I feel like I thought the bonsai tree portion of our theme was in part 2, and then when I watched 3, I was like, okay, that's the bonsai tree thing is in the third one, because I remember them like cliffhanging Stallone style to rescue this bonsai tree. But I mean, Miyagi's real smart. He makes everything into a lesson. So the bonsai tree represents Daniel, and
and their relationship really like fracturing apart and then like tying that together, and replanting it and all that, and talks about the strong roots and all that kind of stuff. But
you could teach a class on this director's filmography.
Yeah. and I think Pat Morita, who plays Miyagi, was nominated for a Razzie Award for Worst Actor, and I didn't feel like that was deserved.
He was the best one in the movie.
Yeah, like he's always the bright spot in these movies, because you got, you know, Ralph Macchio is just like this sort of motor mouthed, like, you know, New Jersey transplant
excellent
kid, and like
adjective for him.
That's basically like his entire character. Like he doesn't really. It's always been surprising to me that like the women in these movies are drawn to him, and I feel like it's just because he's the protagonist of the movie, and it's not actually like representative of how things might be in real life.
But just remember, Elizabeth Shue was dating Lawrence before she started dating Daniel. But no, I think those Razzie people are probably just picking on this movie, because that was a great performance. He's always good in these movies, and I wanted to maybe talk a little bit about cultural appropriation, but as I kept watching the movie, it was like, they're not really like, I think there's a line between appropriating culture for like clicks or for monetizing purposes, and then there's actually like living by the lessons of the culture. And I think this movie kind of tries to get Daniel to understand that you have to live your life by the philosophies of karate, and not use it for what they're using. The bad guys are using it for, is to make money and be successful. So I wouldn't say, like, you know, how American, like Power Rangers was like, you got to learn karate. But then there was this whole cultural issue of like, you know, are you just going and studying Japan because you really like Power Rangers, or are you going there to actually find enlightenment? So I struggle with that sometimes, especially nowadays, where it's like I really do love these cultural aspects, but I don't want to be appropriating the culture. Like, just because I love Rick Steves visiting Egypt doesn't mean I'm going to start wearing, Arabic clothing or anything like that.
Yeah, I've never found this franchise to be, even the first movie, I've never really found this franchise to be especially crass in that regard. I thought it's always, like you said, sort of infused it with a little bit of that, I don't know what you want to call it, like I guess a more spiritual side. Yeah, like a respect that feels genuine, and instead of just like, oh, here's a market we can tap into. Kids like karate, let's make a movie about karate. It actually feels like the people who make this actually like live, or if they don't live by it, then they understand the power of living by those messages and those ideals. So yeah, I think you're right. I think there's I never really bristled against anything like that in any of the portrayals or anything like that in this movie. So I thought they did a good job.
And Miyagi's not a stereotype. I mean, he's probably like a first generation immigrant, but he's not like a stereotype we might see in other films, especially in the 80s or the 90s or 2000s. I mean, obviously the penultimate stereotype was Mickey Rooney in Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Oh God,
So anything that maybe goes light years away from that is progress.
Yeah, and Miyagi is like humanized in a way that that I feel like a lot of those characters. I mean, even like the character in like Pretty in Pink and some of those John Hughes movies. There's like a lot of
Long Dog Dong.
Yeah,
16 Candles.
16 Candles.
That was 3 years prior to this, so probably
right. Yeah, and if you look at those,
not a lot of progress.
That character right next to Miyagi, it's like night and day difference. Like the way that this franchise treats the Miyagi characters.
Well, then it kind of goes back to that thing we were talking about with like Vietnam and the aftermath of World War II in Vietnam, where it's like they were the enemy, and then we had to stop fighting them. Then they became like cartoon characters to us. Not only were they cartoon, they used in propaganda like the images of Japanese people and Vietnamese people, I'm assuming. And then after the war, it's like they became cartoon characters. So to see 15 years after the end of Vietnam, someone that's like proud Japanese, in, like you said, kind of following the cultural philosophies of these people in a respectful ways. It's a big step. Even though the movie's not that great, at least it doesn't go full ham. And try to make us laugh in some, racial way.
Yeah, exactly.
Which 30 years later, we still see. We have not learned.
Not great. You mentioned that like the karate there wasn't that much of it, and I would say that
it wasn't that good.
Yeah, what we get is not very good. Like all of the scenes are like pretty weak, and like the fighting is very slow. And I can't decide if it's because you and I now are used to movies that feature, Jackie Chan and Tony Jaa and like
Jason
the
Statham.
John Wick movies. Yeah, exactly. Like modern stuff that's so fast and like so much more physically impressive than the stuff that's on display here. And like I understand that this movie is not trying to do that. Like they're in different modes, but just like so I don't think it's that really. I think it's just the fighting in this movie is bad, and it's as simple as that. But
well, it doesn't help that Miyagi has to show up to save Daniel, who's supposed to be a trained champion. He shows up like 2 or 3 times to like save Daniel from these guys and just totally owns them, which is great to see because he has that very like he's playing chess, like he knows they're 3 moves ahead or whatever. And but even then he uses only the defensive side of karate. Right. He doesn't go full. He doesn't like rip his shirt off and turn into Goku Super Miyagi level karate or anything like that. Yeah, maybe you're thinking of Dragon Ball Z, Ben.
Oh yeah, that was me that was thinking of that.
Kakarot.
Okay, so one more thing that I wanted to talk about, I guess, as we're sort of getting close to the end, is the tournament.
Thank God, I didn't know we were going to make it to 40 minutes.
Yeah, I feel like we've done pretty well so far.
We were at like 13 minutes, and I was like, I got nothing.
The tournament, man, the rules of this thing need to be completely overhauled. Am I right about that?
Absolutely.
Did you? I don't understand how the referees in this did not understand and perceive what was going on, because like the whole plan is Terry Silver and John Kreese are like on the sidelines, and they got Mike
Barnes,
Mike Barnes, and they're like, all right, Mike, gain a point, let Daniel get a point, and then that'll be, and then like draw it out until sudden death, and then take care of him. But Mike Barnes just like gets a point, and then he like kicks Daniel in the balls or like punches him in the face, and the ref is like, oh, that cancels out the point we previously gave to you. The score is now 0-0 again. And Daniel is like grimacing on the sidelines, clutching his testicles, and like the guy is just like, this is totally normal, back to you guys, all right, round 2, let's go ahead. And like, yes, there is a 3-minute clock that's ticking down, so like this could go on forever, but like, good God, like you have to understand that these moves are being done on purpose, especially since this kid looks like the most evil kid. He's got like this, hatred burning in his eyes, and like you have to be able to read the room and understand what's going on here. Maybe call the match beforehand, or like
he even goes on that tirade where he's just yelling at Daniel about how his teacher's like shit, and he goes on for like 30 seconds during the break, and the referee's like, I guess that's just tough talking.
Yeah, that's all part of the sportsmanship here. The All Valley tournament. Like, 1950s. Oh man, just like eject somebody for doing a blatant move like that, instead of being like, hey, you get 9 more warnings, young man. Like, oh man,
I know it was. I think you're supposed to win 2 out of 3 hits, like, right? So like 2 out of 3 points. So that's
correct until you get into sudden death, right?
Right. So that was the philosophy for Terry Silver, was as long as he keeps getting a point and losing a point, he's doing as much damage to Daniel as possible. And then he has to get it all the way. So if Daniel gets a point, then he has to make sure Daniel loses a point, which is, I guess, harder to do. So Daniel would have to do an illegal move, I guess. So as long as he's doing legal moves and then illegal moves and then illegal moves.
Right, or just like opening himself up for like Daniel to kick him in the chest or whatever, and like, oh, that's it. And it makes total sense from Terry Silver's perspective. It's just a problem when like the system is built in such a way to allow for this like blatant negligence to go on. And this very obvious manipulation of the norms. It was difficult to see, but
if you watch Cobra Kai, eventually Daniel LaRussa is on the board of the All Valley tournament, so he can probably use those lessons in trying to reform the rules.
Yes, please overhaul that stuff, Daniel. Come on. And then it doesn't help that Daniel does not score a single point until the very, very end. He's just getting his ass handed to him the whole time, and like you're saying, he's supposed to be a trained champion, and like even with Miyagi's training and like his pep talk and all of that stuff, he just kind of sits there and like doesn't ever do anything very impressive. And I think that's part of like the whole like.
Well, he does use his kata, which was the only thing Miyagi showed him during the training montage. It was kata on the beach, plant the bonsai tree.
Yeah, and that's kind of it. And like, I feel like Daniel would actually have gotten his ass kicked for real if this wasn't just, if he wasn't the protagonist of this movie. But, it was so anticlimactic when he wins in sudden death, because it's just like, strip away all of the penalty points that Mike Barnes got. He still scored 5 points or something in the match, and Daniel scores 1 and he's the winner. And it's like, I guess a W is a W, but it just felt like,
man, you know that better than anyone.
Right, yeah, live my life a quarter mile at a time. But yeah, it just felt like really anticlimactic for the final confrontation of the movie, for them to be like, all right, sudden death, and then Daniel just like flips him over and like hits him in the chest, and like that's the end. And the celebration at the end is presented in such a way where it's almost like the exact same celebration that happened at the end of the first movie, which felt like much more earned because of the journey that Daniel went on. And this movie, it just doesn't feel like the journey was difficult enough for him or something. I don't know what it was.
And there was one major puzzle piece missing at the end of Karate Kid Part 3, Ben. I wonder if you can guess.
Let me... no, I don't think
Elizabeth's shoe, Ben. Come on.
Oh, of course.
Put your head out of your hands.
Oh yeah. What if she was just there? What if her thing is just going to the All Valley tournament every year?
She did. She would have done more for Daniel than Robin, his new best friend. What was her name? Jessica? I can't remember.
Yes, Jessica Adams, I think.
The actress's name is Robin.
Yeah.
Got it. 10 years his senior.
Yeah.
I thought maybe that because he's married in Cobra Kai, and I was trying to see if it was the same actress. I was like, that'd be kind of funny.
Oh.
But it's not. Not that I could tell.
All right.
That wasn't a good ending piece of trivia.
I mean, no, it was. I just don't have anything else in my notes, so I feel like that's kind of.
Well, what would you have done had you beaten Barnes, the bad boy of karate?
I don't know. Maybe made some sort of grand proclamation about how I was never going to fight again.
Yeah.
Now, nobody's. So it would be written about in all the karate magazines, and everybody would just like have a very clear understanding that there's no way that this is going to happen again, and like nobody can bully you into it.
I didn't really like that he wasn't going to defend his title. I mean, I understand Miyagi's point of view, but if you're gonna, that seems kind of disrespectful of the organization, the All Valley organization.
That too. Like you're not even going to show up. Miyagi was like, the karate isn't going to mean anything if you just do it, like just to defend, this piece of plastic, this trophy. But like, I kind of thought like the institution of karate, like Daniel has like devoted his life to the study and perfection of these techniques, and like, I can see a case being made where like defending your title is the honorable thing to do, for the sport or for the activity or whatever you want to call it.
And as champion, he could use a megaphone for Miyagi's philosophy, but that actually requires him to show up to the tournament.
Yes, it does.
And even if he loses, right, he can still say, "Well, I practiced the karate we've been learning. Even though I lost, that's not what matters," or whatever. He does it or something as his face is smashed by Barnes's foot.
Yeah, exactly.
Bad boy karate, of course.
All right, so I think that's going to bring us to the end of this discussion. Oh, Tyler, it sounds like the Threegle is
there she is, flying high,
majestic for above us, and once again dropping down a little little piece of paper here.
Parchment there, nice catch.
And
behind your back this time, awesome.
Oh yeah, unrolling that, and there's a quote here from Jeremiah Kipp from Slant Magazine. It looks like it's from a movie that just so happens to have the number 3 in the title. And the quote here from this review is shot in such a way to capitalize on the brief fad of Reagan-era 3D movies. There's less memorable POV shots from the killer and more images from the perspective of the victims. So I wonder what that could be referring to. I guess we'll find out pretty soon, Tyler.
Sounds very familiar.
All right, Tyler, do you want to tell people where they can find you online?
Yes, you can find us at NJNM Podcast. And of course, Space Whale 2020X is always floating through space, knowing all. And
what's been going on with old Space Whale these days?
Whale?
Any adventures?
No, with Space Well, I mean, there's adventures before I turned into a space whale, but for now, I'm just kind of floating around the planet. And sometimes, I have Space Whale has some views on pop culture and stuff like that.
Sure, yeah, I'm sure people are very curious to know what the hell that is.
Yeah, if you remember Star Trek 4, there was a probe that came to the planet trying to look for the whales. That's where the space whale's from.
Did we talk about Star Trek 4 on a previous podcast episode, or did we just review it in written form on the old
NJNM? I believe we only review it in written form, my friend, because there is a third entry to the Star Trek series.
So,
Return of Spock, or Spock Returns, or Death of Spock. Search for Spock. There we go. Found it.
Oh, search for Spock. Yeah, there we go. All right. Well, yes, you can hit us up on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Ben Pears. And I think that's going to bring us to the end of this episode. I think we have one more movie in this miniseries, Tyler, and then
much like Cobra Kai season 2, we gotta put this thing to bed.
I'm not sure because we're approaching the middle of December right now, and we've got the holidays and stuff coming up. I'm not sure exactly when that next episode is going to get recorded or released, but it is coming. We only have one more in this miniseries, and then we'll figure out what to do with the future of this podcast, the far future.
No one cares.
But yeah, so
it's gonna be 5 years, and we'll do like NJNM out west, and we'll only do westerns.
Oh, sweet! That sounds.
I know.
Really
does
awesome,
that sound freaking cool?
Oh man, we may have just locked in the next miniseries right here. I don't know.
Gotta watch
2025. I'm waiting for you.
For it, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's gonna bring us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next time.